Hey everybody, this week I did an interview with Dr. Seeds. He is kind of an interesting guy. He has this crazy, I don't know, I don't want to speak for him on how much it costs, but it looks like this $10, $20 million complex down in Ohio. But he's one of I think the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, the MLB, pretty much all the professional sports use him as a consultant for their athletes. So he is interesting because he comes from this orthopedic surgeon background, became super successful. You know, like I said, he's treating all the top athletes in the country. He's helping them get back on track, has this crazy complex. But now he's into this kind of integrative sphere where he's working with peptides. And I didn't know much about peptides. We got into it a little bit on this interview. I wish we would have done a little bit more, but he was a really interesting guy. So we actually talked on a little bit of a broader range than just peptides. But peptides are essentially they're a signaling molecule that are inside your body. You have over 7,000 of them, and that's just the ones we know about. So there's these natural molecules in your body, and they can do everything from making your skin darker to helping your joint heal up more to treating chronic diseases to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because there's just so many different kinds. There's so many different applications, and it's this huge emerging field of medicine that he is on the forefront of. So Dr. Seeds, super successful orthopedic surgeon, really understands his biochemistry and how the cell works. And that's why he got into peptides, and that's why he's now one of the top teachers in the peptide industry. And I do want to make a little bit of a preface. We talked about biohackers a little bit in this conversation. And I want to say a couple things. Number one, I think biohacking is hugely a positive thing in the sense that it's changing your lifestyle, it's eating better, it's doing better exercise. It's basically just trying to live a healthier life. And I think that's an immensely positive thing. So you'll hear us talk a little bit negatively about some of the biohackers, but more of that comes from the shakers and movers in the biohacking industry. And I think some of those guys, and I've personally met with them and been on the back end of some of the work I've done with them, are pretty corrupt in how they're working in this industry. And they're very money oriented. They're not oriented towards helping people. If it means that they're going to make more money, they're going to choose making more money. And so I think that's a really bad thing in this industry that people need to be aware of. And I kind of mentioned that in this is that people will, just because it's like in the biohacking industry, they'll gravitate towards it as safe. You want to make sure things are effective. You want to make sure that you're not just being taken advantage of by somebody who's good at marketing, that has a platform, and all those kinds of things. So just understand that when we're talking about biohackers, there's a little bit of pessimism towards that community because we both have seen kind of the back end of that. And it's not towards the people that are trying to improve their lifestyle and their health. I think that's a very positive thing and has a great net effect on the, population of America who needs that. So that being said, here's the interview.
I'm envious of you or people like you that understand the biochemistry with firsthand knowledge. For me, I can read those things and I have enough medical terminology that I can say, okay, like I understand what they're saying, but is it true? Like I don't have enough, just by reading these kinds of papers, enough knowledge to really evaluate like, oh yeah, that makes sense because this is happening over here. I don't have that biochemical knowledge. So.
Gosh, it took me 35 years to get to that point. There's a lot behind it. I mean, even when I talk to people who believe in what they're doing, it's interesting when you have some pretty fruitful discussions of where maybe in a test tube it might make sense, but in vivo and with other things happening in the cell, it doesn't make sense. And that's kind of where you put all these things together, especially with things that are written, that are translational papers that come out of like work that's been done with mice and rodents and so forth. You gotta, there's a big difference between a mouse and a human. And sometimes you'd like to think some of these things are going to be great and they're not even close, but all of our work has come from mice and you can't negate it because it's where all the research is started. And So it's just a matter of talking to people and kind of getting some ideas of, what their background is and how they're really thinking through the problems or the issues and where they see the benefits, and trying to correlate that, into what other people have been doing. So.
Yeah, I think that would be the most, like I said, not having the firsthand knowledge that somebody like you might, or somebody that's studying in Italy, we take the majority of our knowledge from authority figures, right? So most of what we know is from somebody who has the firsthand experience. But it would be a scary thing if, I found out at some point that, yeah, ozone is placebo. So like I'm, interested in knowing that kind of stuff too, as much as I can. Have you seen it? So you said you investigate stuff, and I know I'm kind of getting away from what I was intending the interview to be. Have you investigated stuff that is fairly large, like ozone therapy? I mean, I don't know how many people are doing it on a regular basis in the United States, but it's significant enough for, 3 to 4 companies. They're not huge, but it's significant enough. Have you seen therapies out there that are kind of like that really just have no credibility, and, it's just kind of a sham, so to speak?
Well, I wouldn't call them shams. I would say, yeah, there are a lot of things out there like that. I mean, 3/4 of the supplement industry is that, or more. I mean, let's take, for example, it's all about the messaging, and it's all about building hype around anecdotal stories, and which we all are part of. I mean, you can't. This is how physicians communicate, and we base our treatments by doing things ourselves and looking at responses, and we get some of these responses. So no one's, there. So it's really, you got to be careful, especially in our field of regenerative medicine, where everybody is out there kind of on the frontier of doing things that are better for people and trying to help them, where sometimes there isn't the data that you want to validate some of the possible research papers that have been referenced, like in animal studies that are trying to transition them into human studies. As long as we know that the toxicities aren't there with certain protocols, and that there's no harm done, that's a great starting point, right? But I would say, I mean, some of my most recent things that I've and that's actually part of what I train my fellows in, is that I get my fellows pretty well established in understanding how to work through pathways, and to understand the biochemistry and the molecular aspects of cell signaling, so that no one can bullshit them through something. And you can always catch people when they're bullshitting you, and that happens quite a bit, especially when they're reps trying to sell you something, or they're trying to talk to you about their supplement, or because their knowledge is very finite, and they only know the scripted parts of what they're supposed to know, and it's because they're trying to sell you a product. So I've actually, that's part of in my fellowship. It's really empowering the physicians to be in a place of where they can absolutely go anywhere and evaluate something, especially when people are making these claims on improving mitochondrial efficiency and so forth. And speaking on that, there are companies that are out there with, let's say, like the hyperbaric oxygen is a very big thing right now, and and a lot of us have a lot of experience with hyperbaric chambers with wound care. But they have to be done in the right type of hyperbaric chamber with with a higher atmospheric pressure. And so all,
Yeah.
all of these portable hyperbaric chambers that they're out there selling make absolutely no sense to me, because you can only go up to 1.3 atmospheres with those. And that's basically, if you calculate out the percent of oxygen that you're truly infusing, supposedly, you're not doing much more than, you're doing a little bit more than 21% O2 at 1 atmosphere. It ends up being like 24, 26%, which is the same as sitting.
That's so ridiculous.
And I had that. I was actually in a convention and had this discussion and got surrounded by a lot of doctors while I was having this person explain this to me. And they gave me they sure didn't do a good job of explaining it. And then I had to go through the math with them and say, well, let's just talk about it. And I think that's been it's a tough thing when you've got doctors who believe in some of these things, because we do know there are areas that it can be very helpful, especially in wound care. But you got to represent you got to represent the process right. And if you go and you look at some of these websites, they'll have on those products, they'll talk about the patients doing well and great stories about how it's changed practices, because a lot of practices have opened, especially more of the wellness type of centers that are like, they do other things like cryotherapy and things like that, where it'll be another modality of treatment, and they'll fill their clinics with a couple of them and make all of these claims of what they're doing for people. And I'm just going to tell you that the science doesn't support it, and it's all placebo, because you're not doing anything with those. If you can't go, if 1.3 atmospheres is as far as you can go, you're not doing anything.
Did you get the chance? So we met at ACIM for a second last year. It was real brief, but did you talk to Bill Delp while you were there at all? Okay, so he's, to me, I found him to be really interesting on the topic of hyperbaric oxygen. He was saying the exact same thing. He's like, hey, they do these studies, and basically the metal enclosures or whatever they are, and then these cloth ones pop up, and they take those same studies and say, hey, we're the same thing. But he was saying the exact same thing you were, and he was really interesting because he had he got into hyperbarics because he was working on oil rigs or something like that, something out in the ocean where they have divers.
Yeah.
And he would actually have to control like an entire apartment room, like for these guys, and have all the correct gas mixtures. And he said it was a very exact science, because you do the wrong thing, you're going to kill 4 people. You know, that's how he got to start into this. And he was just really understood hyperbarics unlike anybody I had talked to before. So, but that's one criticism I have about, like, there's kind of this mindset that it's conventional versus alternative. And then it's like, but then alternative is just anything that's not conventional. So so people all of a sudden think that, oh, because we're integrative or alternative, now it's good because it's not conventional. But it's like, personally, maybe peptides or ozone therapy shouldn't even be an alternative therapy, right? Like it's just some form of medicine. So I think once people say that alternative is safe, they just start going for everything. But then it's like, man, some of the stuff out there is crazy. Like these conferences you go to, it's just like that. I don't know anything about that, but that cannot work, is kind of how I come at it. That's probably a bad approach, but you see a lot of things that just don't make sense.
So my favorite part used to be until I've been sometimes asked to not enter some of these bigger, I don't know if my face is on a list or something, but I've been asked not to enter sometimes into some of the bigger forums of where everybody shows off their products, because that was something I enjoyed going through and listening to people, to let them just set themselves up and tell me about something, and then I'd listen, and depending on what claims they were making, I would just give them my my thoughts, and I would say, you guys need to really think about your messaging. And it seems to be I'd always get a collection of people wherever I would go, and that kind of led me more into like as our fellowship started to build, and especially now, it's become a very, very significant part of making sure that we really give people the ability to make really critical decisions and actually knowing how to ask the right questions and ask to, to get the supporting data that you need to make intelligent decisions for yourself and for your patients. And I really enjoy, there's always some good things in those type of meetings. I mean, because this is really, I really do think there are some excellent new products, some new therapies that are always on the forefront. But there's also a lot. There's also a lot of bad actors, and that is something that that will be interesting to see. There's got to be some type of. There really is no regulation over that at all. There's no. I've always wondered. Do they have to sit down and have a discussion in front of some committee to validate what they're doing there to represent? The process, and of course they don't.
And people don't appreciate how much I'm getting way off track, but this is just interesting to me, and I want to hear from you how you educate these doctors to do more of that, because I think that's really important. But I'm not really allowed to talk about it, but a fellow who's known for making coffee, in this circle, in this sphere, he's a famous guy. And throw butter in the coffee and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had some kind of arrangement and didn't work out. And then he started up this company that is now, let me find it. I don't even know if I should say the name, but a company that sells a ozonated oil capsule. And they're claiming it's the exact same, on no science, nothing, just that it's the exact same as IV ozone. They don't even define what IV ozone is. They just tell people that. And it's like, that is so crazy that there's somebody with that amount of corruption that is willing to basically just say, and let's say that ozone therapy is a really good thing and it does the things that the scientist thinks that it do. Like, you're basically ruining the industry by saying, oh, I have a product that works and I have the platform to spread it, so I'm going to spread it to everybody. I'm going to make some short-term money, and then I'm basically going to ruin this industry because they'll all figure out it doesn't work. But
that's the problem. I mean, that's all those people that claim to be these biohackers and have those platforms. They've built their, there's a place for it because people are looking. They've been in an area where they've gone unchecked. And it's amazing how if you sit any of them down and you really, if they're not prepared for their show and you sit them down and talk to them, they don't know shit. They don't know anything. And it's all about the team behind them that they have, that it's about promotion and it's about, pushing a product. You always have to be, you got to be concerned if your expert is the person behind pushing the product, is what's number one, what are their credentials, where is that? I mean, you kind of have to go through all those steps in your mind, even as good as, the thing is, everybody wants something to sound good. Everybody wants something that, if they want that, most of the people that come to these meetings are looking for that next step. They're looking for that. So they're already captured by people like that seem to, have that stage at this point. I don't think that's going to last very long. As this world
biohacking.
As this world is changing, and as you're getting more authority people and you're getting more of the PhD and the more of the physicians that have that combination of knowledge, that's not going to last long.
Well, and if you're the talking head, you say you're going to live to 150 and you get cancer at 60, that also doesn't look good. So that's going to run into a wall at some point,
Yeah, that's kind of ridiculous talk. I mean,
It's just marketing. I mean, that's all it is. That's the scary thing. But anyway, what was it you were saying about? So you train doctors basically to be able to distinguish between what works and what doesn't, as I understand it. So how are you equipping them to do that?
Well, I mean, so we're bringing back the knowledge of, understanding the body's needs for. I mean, you got to understand how the cell works, and you've got to understand that there's a genetic code that's set in place for everyone that actually distinguishes how the cell is going to manage nutrients like glucose and fatty acids and proteins. And that genome, the genome is influenced by epigenetic changes, and those epigenetic changes can manipulate the cell in changing the way it manipulates these substrates, the amino acids and fatty acids and carbohydrates. And those changes can lead to phenotypical changes of the cell that change the messaging. And we dive into all of the aspects of understanding how a cell makes decisions in keeping itself healthy through life, and where things go wrong to in those epigenetic aspects that can change a cell. What happens in the cell as far as glycolysis and the Krebs cycle and oxidative phosphorylation and the mitochondria and the lysosomes and the proteasomes and how those all interact, because we know the science now, and we know the concepts of where the cell starts to change depending on different insults, and that being just food itself or lack of exercise or age, or other environmental toxins or any of these things. They all kind of work in an effort to change how the cell can adapt or accommodate to those changes. And we spend a tremendous amount of time, and that's kind of all leading to what we call cellular redox. And cellular redox is all about keeping these nuclear cofactors that are NAD, NADPH, ATP, ADP, acetyl-CoA, and acetyl, and those ratios, basically keeping them harmonious or in harmony in a cell to really control, I don't know if you want to call it the yin and yang of the cell. So we go through all of these aspects of understanding the basics of kind of a lot of things you were introduced to in medical school, but you were told at the end of the medical school that, hey, now that you know this, you're never going to need to know it again, because we don't know what to do with it really at that point in time. That was
not important.
But at least you know how the cell works. Yeah. Well, that was 30, 40 years ago. And now we know a lot. And for the people who continued to be involved in understanding, I've just always had a passion for that. And it's been part of my work forever. So I've been fortunate to continue with this, the cellular, the molecular pathways of understanding how all these things can interact with what we're doing currently in different aspects of disease and aging and metabolism and in particular in athletics and so forth. And so it kind of just culminated to a point of where peptides 10, 15 years ago became really relevant, because we had ways now of controlling pathways to activate some pathways that we knew were there, but we just never had the ability to signal these pathways to turn on, and meaning turn on by improving efficiency of a cell or bringing back an immune, modulating the immune system to work in concert with the metabolism, and which is now all of a sudden what everybody's looking at. It's like, wow, they work together, and it's like they've always worked together. It's now we know how to manipulate both of those aspects to work for the patient in providing, improved outcomes and so forth. So, and that's kind of led us into cellular senescence, which, we were talking about cellular senescence 5 years ago, and nobody was talking about it. Nobody knew nobody really understood the word, but we were teaching the beginning of understanding how senescence and quiescence, and which are states of a cell, have so much of a relevance into disease and aging. And so with this group, with my fellows, and some of them I've had with me now for almost 4 or 5 years, it is a continual learning process, because it's a lot of information, but it's a learning process of learning pathways that are relevant, that you won't forget because they have meaning behind them. And we have ways to utilize these pathways in improving efficiency and working with the immune system, and manipulating the environment so the cell can adapt in a way of it knows how to get back to some normalcy. And that's really the key, I think, for people that we never really appreciated, is by saying that. That's a lot I said there, but by saying that, I'm saying, we can't change the genome of a cell. The genes are there, you can't change them, but it's really, and all that genomic testing and all that stuff we did really showed us that just by doing genomic testing, we really can't change much for a patient either. But by understanding the epigenome, or the changes that can happen within the DNA that you're given, you can reverse those changes, and you can do great things. And so that understanding in itself has become, I think, monumental in why cellular medicine is, which is my platform, why it's so valuable, because it always comes back to the cell. So by saying all that, you can sit down with anybody and you can sit with any physician or research person in any silo of medicine, because it all begins with the cell, and we're all trying to accomplish the same thing in the cell, no matter what disease you're working with. There may be different pathways. There may be different type of senescence producing cells that produce the bad things, that lead to disease, whether it's pulmonary hypertension, or atherosclerosis, or dementia in the brain. They're different pathways, but it's all the same process of how the cell goes wrong. And then it's understanding those different type of senescence gene transcription factors that change in the nucleus and change in translation of proteins and so forth. So we spend a tremendous amount of time understanding those basics, because then once you understand the basics, you can read anything, and you can sit down with anybody and have an intelligent discussion about understanding, okay, you explain to me then how you're looking at this in your particular field, because I understand the pathways and the platform of where I have to take your information and make it relative to what I'm trying to accomplish in using your information. Is it helpful to my patient? And so it doesn't matter if it's ozone therapy, or if it's IV light therapy, or if it's infrared therapy, if it's and you can go down it doesn't matter, or if it's a type of supplement, or if it's a program. So you can have a great discussion with anyone if they have that same base of knowledge with you, and you can figure those things out very, very quickly with people. And that's where these guys have to, this is where then you can make good decisions, because now you can, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but you can make decisions in reading papers. You can look into, when you can read a paper and really find out the relevance of that paper, and you can kind of see where they're going with that paper, if it has relevance into into what you're trying to do in accomplishing improvements in your patient care. So having information is very, very powerful if you know how to use it.
Right. So it sounds like you're training doctors to understand the cell so well that they are basically enabled as researchers, where they can go and do reading on whatever topic it is and be able to apply it to where they're at. Does it also give them like the ability to measure things like that melatonin 5 grams is better than 10 grams or whatever? Is there some sort of way they can measure those?
Absolutely. I think they can. Well, what I think it does, and I hope my PhD friends won't take this in the wrong way,
Okay.
but I really believe, and I have a lot of great friends that are brilliant PhDs, but I think they'll appreciate that when you have a clinical background and you have that cellular mechanism side, it's a force to be reckoned with, because you can relate it to so many things. It's like, I think of something when in our research as a PhD in a specific area of, say you're working on a team on mitochondrial efficiency in diabetics and type 2 diabetes, and you're working on some new molecule that may have some effect on efficiency of the mitochondria, or to stop, to control apoptosis, or to improve whatever. Let's just say you've got mechanisms there that that's your work. That work can be, if you're a clinician, you've got just such a wide spectrum of knowledge of not just that area of where that may make sense. It may have some real relevance in the brain. It may have some relevance in the gut. It may have some relevance in the skeletal muscle. It's about putting all of this together that is even more ominous and more, it's addictive, actually, when the more knowledge you obtain, the more you want to obtain, because you can put this to, it's like sometimes what you see, with how biohackers, people who call themselves biohackers and have those platforms where they start spewing out information, and they've got a little of it that really makes some sense, and then they go into some nonsense, and they're in a certain area, they have some really good knowledge because they do understand it very well and they've researched it well. But again, those people have they don't have the base that a physician has to really, because they've spent all their life looking at the body and looking at the systems, and it really gives, this is what I think this is where it comes together, because this is what all physicians have been looking for. They've been looking for to be able to really have that type of knowledge of where they can put the clinical knowledge and the cell knowledge and put it together to make sense of things. Mm-hmm. And finally, we can do that. And that's a powerful, powerful place to be, because you can sit down and, like I said, it's so empowering, and almost and humbling at the same time, to be able to sit down with people that are in specific fields, that are their experts, and actually have conversations that are meaningful. But you may not be on their level of that expertise, but you can get there pretty quickly. And that's the thing I always tell my fellows is, hey, don't ever let anybody tell you that you are that you can't understand something, or that you can't have the knowledge, because that's bullshit. you can get, I always tell somebody, hey, if you give me enough time and I get all the papers and I know everything you're doing, I'm going to catch up to you. I'm going to figure out what you're doing. And I may not be that world expert, but I'm going to have a pretty good base of knowledge that I can have a really good discussion with you. Mm-hmm. And that's going to empower me even more and in helping my patients. And it's really cool when you get these people, you get the researchers you get to talk to, and they understand that's what your real goal is, helping patients and working on improving patient outcomes and working and putting this together. Because a lot of people in that side of medicine, they don't know that there are people out here like us that are actually trying to put some of this stuff together in empowering our patients too. And so it gets to be a lot of fun when you can, and that's the other thing with my group is I've got a lot of PhDs in my group. It's growing into a very interesting conglomeration of researchers and physicians, and now we're communicating, and that's a really cool thing where you let the egos go, and you have really great discussions, and you learn from each other, I get smarter just by all the questions all my fellows and the patients and the people involved ask, because they make you think in different ways about looking at processes and evaluating current treatments. And so going back to what I said, I think the physician is in the most incredible position if they're willing to step out and take those steps again and go back to some of the basics that they were taught and recapture that. And that's where I feel my presence is a good place, is because I feel very good about that I can teach that and bring them back to that level of where they can then put all this together and accomplish some incredible things. And that's what we're doing. I mean, we just had a wonderful program we did with the Lymphoma Leukemia Society, one of the biggest societies in the world. And we got to highlight the aspect of peptides on the forefront of research in lymphoma, in hematological cancers. And we actually did an online one day, let people just from all over the world come in and listen to what we were talking about. And it was just an incredible experience, and just showing people what is happening on the forefront of peptides specifically, with certain hematological cancers, and how those type of projects, not just peptides, but small molecules and so forth, have led to some of the most current therapies in cancer, but also in diabetes and other aspects of medicine, because a lot of things come from cancer treatment. A lot of treatments in some of the anti-aging things we do. So it was a wonderful way to highlight what our society is doing, our institute is doing, and show the relevance on the forefront, and then give people some basic knowledge of, hey, this is what we're doing in peptides. This is what's happening. So we got great feedback from that, and we actually ended up raising like over $50,000 in a day for the society.
Wow.
That was great. It was crazy, but it all just came together because we wanted to show the world what's happening right now in this area of cell metabolism and cellular medicine, how valid and important it is in the future of basically everything.
Yeah, and I want to segue more into peptides in a second here, but I want to kind of close that loop on that training, because I think it might be valuable for people. Number one, it sounds a little bit intimidating when you kind of spell out like all the biochemistry, at least for me, maybe not for smarter people, but it sounds a little bit intimidating. So what does the education process actually look like? Like, how intensive is it? Is it How long is it? That kind of stuff. And then number two, if doctors want to get trained with you, how do they join this group?
So it's meant to be not intimidating. It's meant to be educational by relating. The way that most, so we're capturing people that are already practicing medicine, people that are already brilliant in their fields, people that are already smart in what they're doing. And you've got to be able to take basic concepts of maybe, of the Krebs cycle or of glycolysis, and you got to be able to relate it to something they're doing presently so it sticks and makes sense. So a lot of it is just taking boring basic biochemistry maybe and relating it to what they've been doing and didn't understand what was happening, why they were doing it.
Okay.
And then lights start going off in their heads like, holy shit, wow, I knew that. I've been doing that. And okay, now this makes sense to me, because once things start making sense, then it's like it's a growth that continues to where you just have things that stick, that because you already have a tremendous base of knowledge. And so my job is to present that information in a fun way, but in a way that makes a lot of sense in relevance to what they're doing today. And so typically the fellowship is a year. It's a year, but it doesn't stop, because I've had people training with me for over 4 years, because we don't stop. It keeps going. And it keeps going because everything is relevant to the current aspects of how medicine is changing so fast in understanding how we're understanding the cell better. And what happens is, there may be some breakthrough in neurodegenerative disease that has to do with, say, P53, which is a tumor suppressor gene that has been studied in tumors and oncology. And all of a sudden there's been a breakthrough in neurodegenerative disease where they've looked at a mechanism of where the other transcription factors that affect this P53, which is a controller of redox of the cell and all these other things. But let's just say there's some relevance to, they've got some breakthrough in understanding the mechanisms better of how, if in looking at the let's say the proteasome, of how that may affect the breakdown of some of these proteins that are made, and all of a sudden they've been using something that they found a breakthrough in stopping that, and then that has a play in oncology, and then oncology looks at that and says, well, wait, we can take this further. It's that kind of stuff that becomes very contagious once you have some basic knowledge. And so we integrate even that. We even go really far down the road and pull out some things that seem incredibly complicated and break it down into something very understandable, because really it is all understandable. It's not that it's complicated. It's just, you got to have somebody be able to explain the story to you and really make it like a story, so that you don't forget it, and then you build on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about memorizing pathways. If you know why a pathway works and you know its relevance, you don't have to know all the little nitty-gritty parts of that pathway. You just need to know the basics of it that makes sense, and then how signaling can change it. And so that's what we spend a tremendous amount of time on, going through all the systems and all the relevance, to starting out with cell redox itself and looking at the importance of redox. And so we typically we have like 4 big kind of quarterly courses that are like 2-day courses, and then we have some little courses in between. And that's how we kind of put it all together in a year time frame of giving people just the basis of jumping into this but at the same time being able to utilize these aspects of peptides or small molecules in their patient care immediately, to see to actually appreciate the relevance of what they're doing, and then to build off of that knowledge also, because then it all even makes more sense, because they were actually experiencing the improvements that they understand through the cell efficiency, or the flexibility of changing the metabolic flexibility of the cell and improving the efficiency, and actually do that in a patient. And that becomes the point of that's invaluable, because then those people, I'm just very fortunate to have people that have, that don't want to stop seeking that knowledge. And that's why I guess that's why we're in the place we are, because more and more physicians and other healthcare providers that are in this space, NPs and nurse practitioners, NPAs, and people that are also working next to physicians that are in this field, they're all seeking this knowledge now. And I think it's in its infancy, because I've never seen anything, 5 years ago when I was pushing this message, it wasn't like it is now, where all of a sudden where people are really doing their homework to search out the information, because you can look and see that you can look at and really figure out the validity of something pretty quickly once you get your hands into something as a physician, and you start listening to how people are teaching you, and how are they teaching this information, and how is it being referenced, and where is it coming from. And I think that's what's been our secret to success, is that it's all science based, and it's all the references are there. I'm big on the reference part, but I'm big on bringing the right message that they can't forget. Yeah. And I think that's the key in making it relevant to what they're doing in their current practice. And that is, I think, where you can then, as I tell everyone, as they start this process, you're going to learn a new language, basically. And it's going to take a while for you to understand the language. But once this starts sticking and you start having parts of the language come together, then the more I talk and other of our fellows talk and teach, you're going to understand more of the language. You may not be able to speak it, but you can understand it. And you can it starts to make more sense. And then as your understanding gets better, you start speaking it. And then that language becomes really powerful when we then can have a conversation. That's very special when that happens.
Well, it sounds really enabling. So like it gives doctors the ability to, I don't know, step forward in confidence and have, be able to think, essentially, because I've heard medical school called memorization school before too. It's just like a lot of memorization. I appreciate that you say that. It's not about knowing all the little nooks and crannies of everything and every detail of its process or whatever. It's actually understanding how it works and why it works. And then go ahead.
No, you're right. It's understanding. The whole key, my job is to teach people how to think through a process and to understand the relevance of it, and also go to the next step and see where can it be applied, and to understand that it's again, I said a physician is in a very powerful position, having the clinical knowledge that they have. If they just step out of their comfort zone and go back to trying to figure out the whys, start at the beginning of where does this start? All disease starts because something goes wrong in the cell. all of, it's no different than we just did in fact, we just did a 2-day course in Vail on performance and repair and recovery. And it was a very advanced course, but it was for the level of my fellows that had been with me for a while. It was a tremendous course because we had a great amount of information that now got to a level of where understanding how you can appreciate where when somebody says they overtrain, they reach their lactate threshold, or they can't improve their VO2 max, and understanding respiratory quotients, and all of these things all come together. It's really awesome when all of that is now relevant, and it's not just a guy talking to you who does performance in a gym and says, well, the VO2 max is this and this is what we got to work on. All of a sudden you got a physician that understands everything about the cell.
Some good athletes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And that makes it fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I was looking through some stuff. I saw, is that your facility on those videos with like the football field, the track, holy crap. Like I was blown away. So for the audience, if you haven't seen this guy's facility, it's crazy. And you've treated NFL, NBA, and pretty much every professional sport, whether it's dancing or whatever. You've kind of done it all. And it seems like a lot of it's built on the premise of peptides. Is that correct?
Well, peptides are a part of it. It's built on the premise of, that's where everything started, because of the knowledge of the cell, of what I said. And it's about it started from accelerating recovery and recovery from overtraining or recovery from an injury. And I just happen to also be an orthopedist, and I also happen to be sports trained. And so there were a lot of great synergies that made this really important early on for me, not in that particular niche. Mm-hmm. And that's where it started, because I could accelerate recovery, and I could, the key to an injury with an athlete is, especially if they're high performance, is to make sure that when you get them back to their level of their height of performance that they were once at, if it's a heightened performance level, you don't want to get them back to that level where they've developed, where they repaired something with any type of scar tissue or any type of fibrotic tissue in a healing tendon or muscle or in that fashion. Because why? Because they're set up for re-injury. That's why you see all these re-injuries, because they don't go through the right mechanisms of stopping those processes. So those are some early on things that we did really well, and we're able to get people back and they didn't get hurt again. And that kind of set us off and built our reputation. Like, hey, if you want to get better, but you want to be better for a long time, this is a possibility of where you could look. And so that's where it started. And the beauty of the facility is it's, you don't know, it's over 900,000 square feet of indoor track and field and courts. And so I've got every place that I can return an athlete to their playing level. Like, I can take them from the recovery at the very beginning if surgery is needed, or if it's not, and I can go from the beginning and I can go to the end, because I have every part of that. Mm-hmm. And that's the real key to I want to make the premise of, or I want to make the statement that it's really not about that high level athlete. It's about anybody. Mm-hmm. To get them I can take it's the same thing with my weekend warrior or my mother of 3 who has a terrible injury, an ankle injury, or whatever. It's the same thing. It doesn't matter what athlete you are. We can utilize the ability of what we learned early on to take from those high performance people and parlay it into everything. And so when you have a team that works together like that, you can accomplish a lot. And that's the problem. You get people lost in different processes of treatment protocols of where they go to this place for this, where nothing's congruent and nothing goes from A to Z all the way through the plan. And I guess I'm talking maybe say an injury, but in the same token, we work with some significant disease processes and strokes and ALS and multiple sclerosis, and because those, and I might have this athlete that's has a $60,000 contract training right next to a person that has multiple sclerosis that's just trying to survive, and it's that environment is very important for everyone to appreciate, because it's kind of really it's fun to actually watch the relationships that develop just in those settings, when everybody knows they're there for the same reason.
Well, it seems like a really intriguing setup that you have, and just that it's A to Z, and it looks like a really fun place to be. I'd say that. I also noticed you were doing some tire flips. I saw a video, and I gotta say, you're looking pretty beastly, and I mean that in a good way. Did you used to do like strongman or anything like that? Did you used to compete in sports as well?
Oh gosh, I've just trained.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not. I used to train when I was younger, competitively in Taekwondo, full contact, but that was a very long time ago. While I was and I had to make some decisions on continuing to fight or to go to med school, and I made the decision to go to medical school, which was really smart because I was a heavyweight and I was fast, but I wasn't great. I thought in my mind I was great and good, but there were people much better than I. And but it was I've always been in training, in the training mode of that's always been something very near and dear to me. So I'm a connoisseur of many training methods, resistance training, anaerobic training, and HIIT, and it's been that way my whole life. So I've been in that part of the performance aspect from day one. So that's kind of given me a whole nother, I feel if I can't walk the talk, if I'm not representing everything I'm doing, then I'm a fraud. and I feel, I'm almost 60 years of age, and I feel just as good as I did in my 20s, and I'm stronger, I'm faster, I'm smarter than I was in my 20s, and I hope it just keeps getting better, and I keep challenging myself that way to show that I don't believe that age is a discriminator. You just have to know how to work around it, and so I do believe in building muscle, in combination with aerobic training and other type of training to take advantage of what you can do with peptides, and small molecules. I look at it as a whole concert, like an orchestra. It's not just one thing that makes it all work. It's a multitude of aspects of putting together, nutrition, sleep, training, stress management, peptides, supplements, nutrition, as I said. So yeah, and the tire flipping, I mean, that's just one thing. It's a fun thing to do. My wife actually bought that for me as a Christmas present.
Hey, here's a tractor tire.
Well, that's a 300-pound tractor tire, and she bought me a 300-pound one, and she bought me a 750-pound one. And the 750-pound one is the one that you train, with the hammers and that you hit, and
Yeah. Right.
you know, but my wife appreciates, that's kind of the thing she does. I have a garage that's full of stuff, you know, and she does a wonderful job every year of finding something new, because training is all about changing how you train and adapt to your training, or else you don't get better, right? And I never do anything the same. I always mix things up, and yeah, so I don't know. It's just it's fun, but then when I do that, I can have meaningful discussions with my athletes, with their trainers, with their strength coaches, because I know exactly what they're talking about, or you know, I have a good idea of the training methods, you know, so that's another aspect of why I think that's very helpful. And
Well, it seems like that's, yeah, important to be able to relate to them and understand. And they're probably going to be more apt to listen to you too if they know that, you know, you, like you said, you do the workouts and you understand where they're coming from and the training and all that. And I would love to talk about that. I'm probably not as big as you, but I like to work out too. I used to do a little bit in competing for different stuff, but anyway, I want to segue a little bit into peptides, because that's what you're known for, and we've been talking for an hour now and haven't really touched into peptides. Probably my fault, but at any rate, what is a peptide? Let's just start there.
well, so peptides are basically just signaling agents. They're amino acids that are combined by a peptide bond that have a carboxyl group on one end and an amine group on the other. And they're really defined by the different amino acid sequences and by the rotation, if it's cyclical or helical, or that determines its power or its ability to change signaling. And peptides are basically, we make thousands, over 7,000 of them in our body. They can be enzymes, they can be hormones, they can be ligands, they can be receptors. They're constantly involved in the mechanisms of transmitting signals into a cell, into the mitochondria, into the nucleus. It's how the nucleus and the mitochondria talk to each other. It's how they talk to the endosomes or the liposomes or the Golgi bodies. I mean, all the things that make it how signaling can occur to make the cell kind of go through its daily cycle. And it's a 24-hour cycle, and basically based on circadian rhythms. You know, when the sun rises and the sun sets, that's how our cells are adapted to the sunrise and sunset. And that's why sleep is so important. And it's why how things occur in the beginning of the day are so important and relevant to how the cell functions. And so all of this cell signaling is based on peptides. And because peptides are molecules that you make in your body, and when we talk about them, using them exogenously, all we're doing is copying a peptide we know and introducing that into the body to maybe potentially set that signal cascade and activate it again, and because it may be hampered because of some reason. And that's what we do in using or making peptides. We look at where a cell signaling process may go the wrong way and change the signaling of the cell itself, or the transmission of a certain genomic sequence that is producing a protein that is supposed to activate something. If it goes wrong, well, maybe there's a way to make that efficient again, and so the cell can self-correct itself, and you've got to give the cell the ability. And really that all comes down to it comes down to these terms like cellular senescence and cellular efficiency and flexibility. So peptides are really just amino acids that are known to the body, and that's why none of these actually have minimal immunogenic activity, meaning the body can recognize them as normal signaling agents that it's used to seeing. And we can conformationally change them to make them stronger and more resistant to break down if we want longer half-lives. But typically these peptides don't last very long. They're just there to create a signal, and then they disappear. So there's no toxicities with, getting having to be broken down in the liver or the kidney or whatever, where they can build up and cause problems, because they're just natural. It's what your body does. We just may do some things to change them a little bit so they last a little bit longer to carry out their function. And that's where the relevance of peptides are so phenomenal now in every silo of medicine, in particular cancer, because we're understanding more mechanisms of how cancer survive and what can we do to influence the cell to change, to right itself. And I think that's an important thing to understand, is that these peptides is we're giving the cell its inherent ability. If you believe in intelligence of a cell, which I definitely follow all of those aspects of feeling that the cell is inherently intelligent because of its genomic sequence. If you give it its ability to make its own decisions with the right players, it's going to right itself, or it's going to figure a way of how to take care of itself in its environment that it won't be disruptive in like letting the immune system come in and help it or whatever. So that's kind of the premise of a peptide. It's a signaling agent, and it's learning, and that's why it's so valuable to understand the cell function in a normal setting and in a disease state, because then you know where things can go wrong, and then you've got some areas of where you can, okay, well, this is my plan of attack to try to change that environment, to give the cell the ability to right itself and to try to gain back some of those aspects that where the cell can then adapt to change, because that's what a cell basically lives, to adapt. And the only way a cell survives is by challenging it to adapt, which is all about life. And so you just have to know how to work within that space, or to try to give the cell the ability to continue to adapt to change.
Really, it's so incredible when you think about it, and just you talking about the intelligence of the cell just makes me think, I mean, regardless, I don't have an opinion on that because I just don't know enough to have an opinion, but regardless of what you think about a cell, intelligent or not intelligent, I mean, you just have to respect the absolute complexity of these billions of things that are in your body, and they're all working together harmoniously to create you. So there's the individual cell, but yeah, anyway, it just always fascinates me to talk to somebody that understands that so much. So
don't give me that much credit, because no one understands it that much. And we keep learning. I mean, I'm humbled every day. I read a new article or I see something that is like, oh my gosh, how could I have not seen that before? And it's that's what keeps pushing you, because we'll never have enough knowledge. And there will be at some point, this is where technology will come into play. There will be algorithms, and like there are now, in how algorithms are helping us identify epigenetic changes, methylation changes, and so forth, and how we can start looking at epigenetic changes in disease and building databases to help us look at material that we can never put together in our head. But having the base knowledge of what I've said really goes a long way when you can start pulling those things in and they make sense.
Well, it's important. I mean, especially like you're saying, just for a practitioner to be able to practice and get their patients better results, or just there's a lot of bad stuff in conventional and there's a lot of bad stuff in alternative. And like I said, people just kind of tend to embrace things just because it's in a certain box. And I think that would be super important for anybody that has any medical license or, wants to be able to practice, is to understand what they're doing and how it's affecting the person that they're giving it to. I know I kind of have I was kind of debating on if I should do a ton of research for this interview or just go the more basic route. I chose the more basic route because I realized I couldn't do enough research to really, and I've seen other interviews that you've done and they had some pretty good questions. But anyway, what are some of the common peptides that are used? What are they used for and how are they administered?
So I think the easiest way to look at that is to look at some peptides that people may not realize that insulin is a peptide, and many doctors don't realize that insulin's a peptide and that they've been using it. We've been using insulin. It's been one of the most famous peptides. It changed treatment of diabetes. It changed disease.
Everybody says it's a hormone.
No, it's a peptide.
Yeah.
And so remember what I said, peptides are hormones, they are enzymes, it's a cell signaling agent. And so it's really changing people how they think about molecular aspects of a cell, and how insulin it's a cell signaling agent, and it has an effect on receptors, on insulin receptors, and so that was kind of the crude awakening of understanding some early aspects of, wow, we can change a disease. We can change a disease by introducing insulin. From an extract it started, and then we were able to make it synthetically, and that's how the Nobel Peace Prize was won and all this. But so since the 1920s, we've been able to we've had something that's kind of transpired for over 80 to 100 years here, that we've enabled ourselves to correct a problem with insulin. And then it led to other things like oxytocin and vasopressin and gonadotropic releasing hormones, some other things that are hormones but are actually also peptides, that more bench work was done on. And we really opened up the era of looking into pathways and signaling between aspects of the brain and other organs and so forth. So that was the beginning. And so when I say that, it's really relevant because that has led us to incredible research in all fields, like I said, of medicine. And so there are peptides that are just things called dipeptides, which are just two peptides, just two amino acids, like histidine and histidine and alanine, that are combined with just two different amino acids connected to a carboxyl group and amine group, and that's a dipeptide, and that's a supplement that is known as carnosine. And L-carnosine is a well-known supplement, but no one understood that. Not many people know it's a peptide, and it's a very, very powerful peptide. And in fact, there's been tremendous literature on the use of carnosine in its work in pH buffering and working on insulin sensitivity and glucose tolerance. And they've used it in pediatric studies to show how just carnosine itself can change insulin resistance in young people, just as well as a pharmaceutical. And and that's the kind of knowledge that we bring to the forefront for people to start understanding. It's not all about pharmaceuticals. Maybe there are better options for people, because carnosine works in a way to not just to improve a process of insulin sensitivity, but it has many other ways it works in improving cellular efficiency and buffering pH and controlling calcium and controlling apoptosis of a cell. And when you have that knowledge, then you can appreciate that, let's say, muscle is one of the big muscle, and the brain are some of the bigger areas that have very large concentrations of carnosine. Remember, I said peptides are things that you make. Well, you have carnosine in your body, and carnosine in muscle is invaluable. It's all about buffering pH and controlling lactic acid, and actually a big player in recovery and glucose absorption into the cell. And so when you start putting all those together, it becomes very powerful to understand that, oh my gosh, there's this supplement out there that's a dipeptide that has tremendous place in sports performance and recovery, and also has a tremendous place in nutrition. And I've just talked about a supplement, and also it's a heavy metal chelator, like vanadium and things that are toxic to the brain. It actually crosses the blood-brain barrier and can be a chelator, and is used in neurodegenerative disease. And I've just been talking about one peptide that's something you can get over the counter, that has no restrictions, and is a peptide. It's a dipeptide, and it's incredible. I could go on and on about just that peptide.
Oh, I'm sure. And I know you said that we make 7,000. Is that just what we know, or how many there are?
That's just what we know. I mean, there are myokines, which are muscle signaling agents that we know of, maybe about 60 of them, 70, and there's probably over 500, 600, 700 that are there, but we don't know what they do, and that are peptides and small molecules. So we're just in the infancy of really starting to understand this communication. But wow, it's just, once you get a taste of it, you just don't want to stop trying to put it all together. And that's what makes, just talking about a supplement that's already out there and been out there for years, and people don't understand the relevance of just that supplement.
Is there concerns about, so you said it's just an over-the-counter, you can get it anywhere. Is there concerns about purity or quality? Because I know the supplement industry has a bad name for that. So in terms of peptides, what's the concern there?
Yeah, so there are, and you can get certificates of analysis, you can demand those from certain supplement companies, and they can, to show the validity. And there are supplement companies that have their supplements that are sent out to third-party evaluators to validate that's exactly what they have, and you'll have companies that do that. So there are, and that's part of the aspects of what we talk about also, in trying to represent, so the physicians and people understand that they know those questions to ask to get that validity in a product that they're going to use for their patients, or are going to represent what they're talking about. So absolutely.
What are some of the ones you take on a daily basis, or I don't know, regular basis, I should say?
Oh my gosh.
All of them.
Well, no, I mean, I do a combination of things that change. I mean, I'm more about prebiotic, giving my microbiome the starch, the oligosaccharides and the starches, the starch resistance type of prebiotics that the microbiome will use to keep the diversity of my microbiome, instead of trying to reproduce it by giving it a probiotic, which may not be doing what we think it is. And it's again, I believe in letting the body build its own diversity. So I'm big in prebiotics. I'm big in I like the basics like of collagen. Collagen hydrosylates or collagen peptides are tremendous players for everyone that have the basic amino acids that you need for remodeling of the cell and the extracellular matrix and tissue healing. And I could just tell you countless stories of just using collagen in my practice of where people come in with, painful knee joints or hip joints or problems with recovery, and I just put them on collagen and it changes their life. Just collagen peptides that are nutritional, and they'll come back and tell you how their nails are stronger and their hair is fuller, and that's how you start to get buy-in from your patients also. When you can do little things like that are nutritional, in getting them on the right road. But so those things, and I kind of, it just depends on my training, and what my goals are. Because again, as I told you, I'm constantly changing what I do because I know the cell adapts. I know the muscle gets smart. So I have to keep doing things a little differently. And so I'll rotate things that I may be working on in my body. Like I may be focused on the brain for a 6 week to 8 week time frame, or I may be focused on my gut, or I may be focused in particular, I may have injured something and I may have to change everything to focus on the fact that I'm old and I still get injured, because it still happens. You got to work around injury. I believe in I'm not a branched chain amino acid person. If you are, I would just tell you, use the essential amino acids, because you'll have all the branch chains in the essential amino acids, and you need some of the essential amino acids like methionine and other things that are methyl donors. And so you get more out of that. But then I would take it a step further and say, well, look, why not just use the whole whey protein? Because there's so many other important amino acids in whey protein. Again, it's kind of like giving that look at, do you give a couple instruments or do you give them the whole orchestra? And I'm a big fan of a whey isolate, and those are other issues depending on what you like. But just a whey hydroxylate is a whey isolate is good, or hydroxylate is a great product to be using when you're working in trying to keep muscle mass and not overdo, protect people from sarcopenia and protect them from osteopenia with the collagen and the protein. There are a lot of aspects to that. And at the same time, you got to keep an eye on the pH of the body. So you have to get enough vegetables, and and there are ways to augment the pH by, using like bicarbonate through like Alka-Seltzer Gold, or sodium bicarbonate like baking soda, or using those things to kind of make sure you're keeping the pH aspects of your diet in check, because unfortunately a lot of people get out of whack with that. And then so by doing so, then I'm setting up the environment to take advantage of certain peptides I can use to help me just mitigate life better every day, because I'm getting older and there are things that just work against me with age that we know about. My body is not going to be like a younger person like you. You look like you're in your 18, 19, 20 or so?
And 27. I have 3 kids and 1 on the way, and a lot of people are surprised by that.
But because of aging and genetics, I may not be producing the same amount of growth hormone or IGF-1 that you produce. So I may do things with certain peptides to make my brain produce more, because it doesn't matter if I'm 100 or you're 20, the human brain the anterior pituitary can produce the same amount of growth hormone. It's just what's affecting it and why it isn't producing it. So I endogenously will work on trying to make sure I do that, because it has a great influence on the mitochondria, it has a great influence on cell efficiency. It's a master hormone that it has a lot of influence on cell metabolism, metabolic flexibility. So it's a big player in keeping cell redox right, keeping NAD, NADH, all of those things right. So it's all based on what I'm working on at a particular moment in time.
Yeah, so it sounds highly individualized. So let's say I was like the patient. I got spondylolisthesis grade 2, which is like a kind of like a slip disc for those of you that don't know, and some osteoarthritis back there too. But if I wanted to figure out like what would be a good peptide regimen for me or what I should be taking, how do I do that if I was a patient?
Well, you'd want to find one of our SSRP doctors. That's the cell. SSRP is Seed Scientific Research and Performance is our platform of physicians that have been trained in cell metabolism and cellular medicine and peptides.
Yeah. So is there a website?
Yeah, we actually have a referral set that you can that we refer patients all around the country where doctors are. We have a referral network actually for people that contact the SSRP, and it's actually a social media site right now, and that's how most everybody gets to the SSRP. But there is a website. There is a SSRP website, yes.
Do you know what it is?
I shouldn't I?
Okay, we'll find that later, and I'll put the link in the description. And that's where doctors can go as well to get trained, right?
Yeah, and that's Karen. Karen can give you all that info. She can set you up with all the right links you need, to get, to have people to direct them the right way. Yeah. But yeah, that's what we do, and it's we pretty much have everybody, not just here in the U.S. We have people all over the world. So in England, Spain, Russia, China, Japan, Brazil, the Netherlands, Germany, Portugal. I could keep going.
Yeah, and I don't blame you for not knowing the website. There's a lot of things that I don't know. But I mean, you got a lot to remember too. So I mean, what's a website? But yeah, well,
I'm in one area that's really my weakness is social media and that stuff.
It looks really sharp. I mean, I went through all your stuff and I saw your your website and all that kind of stuff. And whoever's doing it is doing a great job. So I mean, it looks really sharp. I don't know
Thank you.
Yeah, so
I'm blessed to have a team that's been with me for quite a while. That also chose to take some steps with me to step out and form, create the next steps of really, that was another. If I could bring it up, that was kind of, that I'd been building things in other areas and building a presence of peptides and cellular medicine but I didn't like the influences that were on us through industry and through that where I didn't feel we as physicians had control of everything. And so it was like always somebody else was trying to control our message or trying to mold the process of teaching or how it worked, and I just had enough of it and just.
Well, that's what happens when you have somebody that's incentivized by, they're going to cater everything around the sale of the product. And if there's one that has particularly high margins or they happen to like it for whatever reason, it's all going to be oriented towards that. Yeah. And that goes back to my criticism of alternatives too. I mean, you have people that are just as corrupt in alternative medicine as you do in conventional. And I think if more people are aware of that, that's a good thing. So. But yeah, I really appreciate you talking with us today. I mean, I don't want to take more of your time. We talked for an hour and a half. I'm going to do some more digging on peptides. So I'm definitely going to look into that. I'm going to look into that for my injury. Well, let me ask real quick. Does it help with like what I mentioned, spondylolisthesis or osteoarthritis?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, they're definitely processes that can help. Um, and again, like just the disc itself, like when the disc goes bad, the disc has aspects of there's like these histone deacetylase aspects that work on gene transcription and why the disc dies basically. And there are simple things like butyrate, sodium butyrate, which is a supplement that can be used to fight these histone deacetylase, and they're called, butyrate actually is a histone deacetylase inhibitor, so it works on a gene transcription level. And these are things you make in your gut. It's like the microbiome, why the microbiome has such an influence on muscle and bone and soft tissue and brain. And again, it's just putting some of these little pathways together and putting people in, not just, remember, when you're trying to help somebody, it's not that way of your train, give them the anti-inflammatory and then you take their pain away. You're trying to correct problems that could be happening in other disc spaces above and below that problem of your spondylolisthesis. And you're trying to preserve as much of that disc that's left, because there still is some usually. So there's a lot you're trying to accomplish, and that's what cellular medicine's all about: getting to the root of problems, and not just staving off the issue, but let's get to the problem and really work on that part. And then it's incredible where that goes with the other things that people didn't realize, that maybe, okay, I've got a degenerative disc, I've got pain, but guess what? Those other things have been affecting your brain. They've been affecting your microbiome. There's always usually gut issues sometimes with that, where people have some issues. So there's lots of things that come together with any of these problems. And that's why you've got to hit them with multifaceted approaches in trying to improve.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, because it's, especially with like ozone, I think they often just kind of throw an ozone injection into the thing and then send them off. But you're talking about addressing issues in your brain and your gut, as well as the point of injury.
Yeah.
That's,
and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with just doing something that does address to a certain degree an issue, but boy, that's why I think why we're so popular and why we've grown so quickly is because people want to know more. And it's once, it's why you give a person like just a body protection complex 157, a peptide that is real big with recovery and repair, and you just utilize that. Some doctors and even people that on their own use it, and they all of a sudden they've healed something, or they feel better after they've hurt something. They're like, holy smokes, I've never had that happen. I've never been able to do that with anything. And then you capture that person, and then they really want to understand things more. And the same thing on the physician side, because they see what a difference they've made, where they could never do anything like that before in their practice, not with anything they've learned and what they've been given and all the pharmaceuticals in the world. And they didn't give that patient a narcotic. They didn't give them anything that could harm them. They gave them something that actually is healthy for them, and at the same time made them better. So there's a lot of power behind that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time, Dr. Seeds. It was an awesome chat. I really, really appreciate it.
Sure. Well, listen, if you've got Karen's email and number, and we're always here to help you. If you come up with more stuff you want to ask, we're always around. And I've got a great team of fellows that are awesome speakers. You may be interested in talking to more of our group that are really, really bright people that we can hook you up with, that your audience would love to hear from. And because we've got some really, really good people that are out there talking on podcasts all over the country. So let us know.
That'll be great, Dr. Seeds. Appreciate it.